Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. In this episode, I'm joined by guest co-host Mai Santamaria. Mai is the head of the Financial Advisory Unit for the Department of Finance in Ireland. Mai and I met back in February 2018 at a meeting of the Irish Blockchain Expert Group that later became the industry group now referred to as Blockchain Ireland. She's one of the most helpful people I know and always has a uniquely incisive insight or two on what's going on at the crossover of finance and emerging tech when she and I catch up. Mai originally featured on episode 5 of Money Never Sleeps back in 2018. She made a cameo on her 200th episode last year. She's a Techstars mentor, and Mai has also received a ton of shout-outs from Owen Fitzgerald and me on this podcast over the past few years. In this Money Talk segment, Mai and I riff on where crypto exchange Binance goes from here after pleading guilty to violations of the Bank Secrecy Act in the U.S. and being fined $4.3 billion cool ones, with co-founder and CEO Changpeng Zao, or CZ as we all know him, stepping down. We also take a look at the new crypto-friendly Argentinian president and what that might mean for stablecoin adoption. Then we finish up with a mind-opening counterpoint on Ethereum co-founder Vitalk Buterin's new manifesto on DAC. Defensive or decentralization or differential acceleration. All right here on Money Never Sleeps.
I just flew back very late from Spain, as you could, and I'm freezing, man. It's fine.
Okay. Well, hang in there, Mai. But it's like the weather has changed, hasn't it?
Yes, indeed it has. But for the better, okay. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. But listen, you've got some things that happened for you in the last 6 weeks that coincide with obviously welcoming you to the show, Mai, as our guest co-host to talk through these news stories with me. But there was something a bit more lighthearted that happened with regards to these 4 letters that I'm calling PSOI, or Public Servant of the Year. So the National FinTech Awards. And that the now we can say the award-winning Mai Santamaria.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I wish you could actually see my face, not just me hear my voice. Yeah, totally knocked off. I just don't know how to say thanks, to be honest, because the community is just, and I really meant every word I said, it's just, I know how resilient and hardworking the fintech community is in Ireland. Yeah.
Definitely. And it's so appropriate that the person that you beat, Owen beat the person that you beat.
I did not beat.
Sorry, you didn't beat anybody. But the runner-up being Owen Fitzgerald, my former co-host and friend. Yes. Well, still friend, not a former friend, but still friend.
Very much friend.
Yes, but I'm sure Owen was thrilled just to be nominated.
This was, I don't think this was ever a race. I said to Owen, I do hope he listens to this. I'm just holding on to the award until he goes through his probation periods and his new role as central bank. That's the way I see it, because he clearly, shared that award every step of the way. I can't think of anyone who would have been more outspoken and supportive of the fintech. Like you, Pete, this podcast was one of a kind when you guys started. And the fintech community is just all about you pulling in all those strings and keeping us together. And it's great. So yeah, I was pleased, but I said, I'm just keeping in hold for him, and happy to share it, because it's not mine really. It's just for all of you. So
well, no, but thank you for everything that you do, Mai. And I'm glad that we get to have this chat finally on air after, I think it was episode 5 that you were on way back in 2018. Wow. When we first started this podcast. So you were one of our first, what we called back then, victims, because we had no clue what we were doing when we did that podcast back the first 10, 12, 15 episodes. And then we just learned as we went. And one of the things that Owen introduced back would have been, I think during COVID in 2020, was the newsletter. And then that, after about a year of him publishing that then went on ice, just because I had never had time for it, and he had a 6th child, so his priorities went elsewhere. But I brought it back in the last few weeks, and the 3rd edition went out this week. It's fun. I get to do a bit of reflection on each episode, and also share some more media and events, things that I'm doing that are out there and other folks within the community are doing, where we can have this gathering point for people, whether it be online or whether it be in person. So just trying to spread the good word on that.
And Pete, thanks for this, because the newsletters are important. And obviously you have a unique view, obviously, from the Ireland, but also like you're great at actually bridging it back to the US and globally. And there's almost too much. And it's just, you are doing a fantastic job with newsletter of actually being able to digest it almost for us and just kind of definitely creating those bits, otherwise just you really would lose completely.
Well, thank you.
No, really.
Thank you. I'm just one voice amongst many, and inspired by folks that have been doing this for a lot longer than me. So
it's great.
It's all good stuff. Listen, one of the good things that happened in the last week, and well, call it a good thing, call it a thing that had been brewing for a while. The Binance CEO, CZ, and his formal name being Changpeng Zao. Yes. And I've got his LinkedIn profile up here, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But I think there's something to drill into on that. But as you know, the CZ, as he's called, resigned last week. And this was part of a $4.3 billion settlement with the US. Yep. And obviously there's tons of media that was produced on this, but I picked one from a friend, Pet Barisha, who also writes a newsletter called Sporting Crypto. Yeah. And he just summarized it very quickly of, okay, what were the charges? What was the settlement related to? So here we go, right from Pet's newsletter. Failed to report 100,000 suspicious transactions related to sanctioned groups, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, Islamic State terrorist group, websites devoted to selling materials related to sexual abuse of children. I didn't know that. It's terrible. And that now it's ironic that it's the second November in a row with a major crypto founder / CEO that's been brought down. And this year it's the one who had a hand in taking down the one last year, Sam Bankman-Fried. In addition to this, there was a $50 million fine for CZ. He had to step down as part of the deal. This was not a board-driven firing, because I don't think the Binance board had that level of governance. Obviously, we've seen some board nightmares in the last couple of weeks with Sam Altman from OpenAI. And he is now banned from any present or future involvement in operating or managing Binance. So you never want to see this happen to anybody. And CZ has been such a leader in crypto for a very long time. And now he needs to, he stepped down from the company that he founded. Now, he didn't update his LinkedIn profile yet. So I'll call him out.
Well, he's still kind of there, right? He's still major shareholder. Well, he's still got the CEO in the update profile. Okay.
He does. He still does have CEO. So we'll ping him on that. And I've been doing a lot of looking at LinkedIn profiles lately, with looking at all the founders who are now applying for the Techstars Web3 program. And that's one of the first things I do, is I looked at their LinkedIn profile.
Very good. Very good.
Is the company that they're naming and the project that they're working on, is that the first thing listed in their LinkedIn profile? I always look for that. And if it's not, I ask why. Why? And if they say, well, it's new, I haven't updated my LinkedIn profile yet, it's like, that's your professional image. So get to it. But anyway, very minor point on CZ's LinkedIn profile. But
note to myself, double check my LinkedIn profile later on before Pete spots any.
But so what's happening here is that Richard Tang, the ex-CEO of the Abu Dhabi global market, who is kind of a policy and regulatory operative, is taking over. And I wonder if he's a stopgap, or I wonder if he is the longer term solution. It was part of a deal with the government to say you need to put someone in there who's more policy and regulatory focused. But do you think Binance is going to become boring with this?
It's quite interesting because like you pointed out, obviously the news broke out and, everything was full of the news about it. Okay. It's only when the dust settled, and I left my phone aside for 2-3 days while I was at my school reunion and stuff, and I picked it up, and an article particularly that caught my attention was that in the previous kind of rush to break the news about Binance, that the SEC was nowhere to be seen in the agreement. So the CFTC and DOJ are all part of the corridor, well, effectively the agreement, but not the SEC.
And was Gary Gensler just purposely excluded?
Well, the SEC clearly have an ongoing investigation, and they
Yep.
haven't been part of these agreements. So, to your question, it could possibly become boring in a way, because I do not think it's going to be the end of it, really. I mean, the fact that the SEC were not party to these multi-agency agreements pretty much shows there's an action still ongoing. So there's more to come. But
Yep.
now what's going to happen is, under this monitoring arrangements, they will have access to information that is only going to feed, I suppose, into the action that they have. Because, Reed Stark, he worked for the SEC for many, many years. And I know he's always
Okay.
been super critical of crypto overall. But I think he equated the agreement to, what do we call it? A financial colonoscopy.
Jesus.
Yeah. This is, and when you think about it, right? If it's, leaving the AML piece aside, which is serious, right? And leaving the AML governance and process that needs to be in place to really be to the level that is required from a regulatory perspective, the level of monitoring and financial transaction scrutiny they'll be under now. How will this work with the more or less happy as you go behavior that the company has had until now?
Yeah, no, it's not going to work. But they've done a lot over the last few years, though. So I hadn't confirmed this in anything that I had read, but in having conversations with people over the last week or so, they said, listen, these charges have been brewing for years on the Banking Secrecy Act and on the money laundering. And so since then, have they made strides to actually shore up the compliance program within Binance? I would expect so, but I still know people who went in there and, might have lasted 6 months because they're like, oh, no, this is no good. I'm out of here, because they fearful for what may happen. And I think they had done a lot. They shored things up after FTX, at least with the proof of reserve that they had been doing, which demonstrated that they were a solvent exchange. And the fact that they're able to just pay out $4.3 billion without missing a beat.
And the fine.
Yeah. There's something there that makes me think, well, hopefully, for the sake of crypto, they just become a utility, a boring utility. But you're right, by the fact that there is still the SEC charge out there, there's still some drama ahead for Binance.
Binance. I cut you out. I think there's drama ahead. I just think that's not the end of the story. And there's to that question of, will it become boring? I think there's probably going to be two sides to that boringness. One, if it just become boring, if it means it becomes compliant with the law, if anything, it should just strengthen it as an exchange, as a go-to exchange, right? So maybe boring is good from that perspective.
Yeah.
And particularly for the new CEO. So
yeah,
you want
I
it
hope
to
so.
be boring. Yeah, if you want to keep your clients on the books. On the other side, leaving boring aside, or it's the fact that potentially with that ongoing action with the SEC, as you pointed out, that it potentially does lead into further fuel for, other cases ongoing and some precedent of sorts. So it will not be boring, but because it will be interesting to find out how that leads potentially and spills over to the other cases. So,
Totally. No,
definitely not the end of the road for them.
No, and some of the voices out there are saying that, well, that this is good for crypto. So Nick Carter and Matt Walsh from Castle Island Ventures, they have their On the Brink podcast that I listen to pretty much every Monday morning while I'm out for my walk.
Very
and
good.
They were like, Nick Carter was, listen, we're cleaning house here. And that it was SBF last year, and now he's going to jail. And now it's CZ. And that you obviously hold each of them in a different light, depending upon the activities, what they did or what they didn't do.
Yeah.
But these were the folks that drove a huge amount of interest and money into crypto. Unfortunately, SBF did it from the case of fraud in that reusing customer assets that were against the customer agreement, and doing so very, say, liberally is probably an understatement. But then CZ just saying, we're going to build, we're going to build, we're going to build, we're going to gather customers, we're going to bring in assets, regardless of all of these seat belts that we should have on, that we clearly are driving without seat belts, and we're kind of all over the road a bit. But we know where we want to get to, and we're just going to keep driving, and we're going to go at 200 miles per hour. And that just doesn't work, right? Eventually, you're going to hurt somebody. And with the transactions that they let go through, they did.
Yeah.
So, not directly, but indirectly. So they are, great. Let's take all this bad crap in crypto and try to move on from it. And the fact that we've got, call them just the person responsible, the person at the wheel.
Yeah.
While there was this recklessness going on, is now off the road. His license has been revoked forever.
Listen, I agree. I agree, Pete, and I certainly don't, not at all. I would never endorse any of that behavior. I think mostly, particularly when you think about SBF, so willingly doing what he did and so willingly trying to obfuscate and lie. That's never, I said I would never be able to support or condone or accept any of that. But I do believe, and I always say that it's also important to have perspective, okay? We need to be coherent as well. I mean, on one side, and we're specifically talking about crypto. No, we're not even talking about digital assets of the blockchain on a wider perspective, right? When I say about coherence, is why do we demand these 100% top-notch, excellent, premium, 10 out of 10 behavior all the time when it comes to the crypto world? But we don't have the same filter when it comes to the rest of our financial transactions world.
So true.
I mean, why are we not coherent? So I said, I 100% do not condone it, but I'm just saying, guys, can we be a little bit of here self-critical as well? I want the quickest clean. Certainly, I want the premium top-notch 10 out of 10, 5 stars. I will demand it for everything, not just for some.
Yeah. No, I am taking a bit of a holier than thou parapet here, but all of us in this space say, and you know this, Mai, that if you're going to break bad tomorrow, don't do it with crypto, because it's easier to find you and find your transactions in crypto than it is to find you bouncing things around to 100 different global bank accounts completely electronically via Swift and via completely normal channels. So there is tons of other bad stuff happening out in the world at a far bigger scale than what Binance or any other player allowed go through. 110%. But this gets the light shown on it because it's in the media. It's a tiny, tiny part of the global financial ecosystem right now. Less than 15 million global active users of crypto. So this is a tiny, tiny thing, but it gets all the attention. So I thank you for tempering my holier than thou.
No, I just think it's, we just maybe overcritical. Yeah. And, is it happening because maybe they don't want us to focus on the other bits where it's happening and we don't seem to demand this, So
I could go down a rabbit hole there with
for another time.
What was I thinking about? It was yesterday, some analogy between tobacco lobbying, gun rights, politicians' mindsets, how they are funded by their campaigns, and then thinking about all of that in comparison to, well, who else funds campaigns? Big, huge banks, right? And if the one of the views is that I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. I don't want to go down. So let me change course. Let me change course on that. But listen, Mai, I think some of all of this, your thoughts on this and your views on this, that is steering me to think about it a little bit differently. Obviously, your heritage in Barcelona. Barcelona.
Yes.
And see, now you're correcting my pronunciation, so thank you. But obviously being one of the original, I'll just call it launching off points, to be kind, to Argentina.
Yes.
Obviously we had a big election in Argentina in the last couple of weeks. And Argentina is my happy place. I don't know if I shared with you before. I think I might have, that my dad spent 8 years in Argentina in his formative years, I think from the age of 10 to 18.
Oh,
and
wow.
When his dad moved the family down there in the 1960s, when his dad got a big job with Gillette, and he was working in the original big Gillette razor plant was in South Boston, where my dad grew up around there. And they ended up saying to my grandfather, "Hey, you want to, go start this new unit down there in Buenos Aires?" And he went. So I've been there, absolutely love the country, felt like home.
Yes.
My mom and dad came and met us when we were there. Other friends met us when we were there with a long story for another day about a guy called Ramon Fin de Pueblo. But that's, again, another story. That's some surname.
Wow.
So that's Townsend in Spanish, is Fin de Pueblo, right?
I was going to say that's exactly. So, that's brilliant. I love it.
So, but tell us, you were having a conversation with friends about this the other night, about what's going on in Argentina with Bitcoin.
Well, effectively, as you know, is Javier Milei has been elected president over there. So, the conversation started a little bit weird. It was kind of, when you haven't seen people for 30 years, starts with, haven't seen you for 30 years. What are you doing for a living? And then you try to explain what are you doing. And then somehow blockchain and maybe Bitcoin comes into the conversation. And then, people who obviously maybe don't work in financial services, definitely not. A lot of my former primary school mates just happen to be farmers and they have other things in their mind. So trying to explain what Bitcoin is late in the pub or in a bar in rest. Like in Spain is not particularly, Anyway, happens. And then Bitcoin somehow, obviously, it's linked to the headlines with Mr. Milei. And then we started talking about does extreme weird political views goes with strange haircuts.
Yeah.
So
we'll put a picture of him up in the show notes. Javier Milei.
Milei, Trump, Boris Johnson, obviously recent prime minister in Holland, who obviously, anyway, so that the conversation
I'm
was
thinking Starsky and Hutch, if that means anything to you whatsoever.
Fair enough. But no, listen, on the more serious note, we started talking about what would that mean, and there's been a lot in the news about Mr. Milei saying that he's pro-Bitcoin. I'm not sure how more pro-Bitcoin he is than his fellow prime minister in Salvador. I think he's been more against central banking than pro-Bitcoin, if that makes sense. I think that was probably more explicit in his views. But dollarization of the economy in Argentina, it would have a huge impact. If they, Argentina is huge. It's a very rich, very, very, very rich country. It certainly was a lot richer, and clearly, yes, would be great if they were able to stabilize the inflation, which is at 150, 148% at the moment.
Yeah,
but it's been higher than that. So I think it was 1,000% or something at the time of that when they pegged it against the dollar a few decades ago. But yes, we just talked about what it mean, what would not mean. This huge amount of business between Spain and Argentina. There's a lot of Argentinians living in Spain. There's a lot of outflow of money going both ways. There's a lot of Spanish banks, clearly, that just have their South American, Argentinian branches. So there's a lot of discussions there. What would it mean? Would it be easier to dollarize Argentina first, or what impact would that have
on Spanish banks?
Just to think about that for a second.
I always try to stay away from the conversations that require me to pull out a whiteboard and start putting graphs up on it, and supply, demand, velocity of money, all that type of stuff. Is it that significant where the Spanish to Argentinian commercial flow of business and finance, that the dollarization of Argentina might impact and upset a potential big trading partner?
Well, see, there might be an upset, clearly. I mean, the problem, though, is just, even though it sounds like one of Mr. Milei's proposals, and certainly election promises, but he can't print his own dollars. So whether actually
No.
it's real or not, it's a different, or whether actually potentially, I don't think the IMF would actually be lending in them any more cash and certainly not in dollars. Would it have an impact, Pete? I think it would have an impact. How will it impact inflation?
Oh
How
yeah.
the
I don't even want to go down that one. But
it's yeah,
I think you've got a point here on that he is more against central banks than he is pro Bitcoin.
yes,
And that he is just using that and pointing to it as not as a red herring, but as what do they call a patsy, right?
yeah, yeah,
Perhaps referring to JFK. And that is not JFK was not the patsy, but Lee Harvey Oswald being
yes,
referred to as the patsy in the whole
yes,
JFK assassination. That
yes,
perhaps Bitcoin is the patsy in the Javier Milei discussion, in that he just wants to knock down some walls here. And that I read that the other policies he's put forward are a free market for the sale of firearms and human organs, and the repeal of the country's 2020 legalization of abortion.
yeah. He
So
literally said, if you're run out of money, you can sell your organs.
yeah. So for Bitcoin, I don't think that's the intention, but there is a legitimate push for stablecoins in Argentina. That is becoming a very big thing. In that one of the startups that came through the Techstars 2023 program, SaveChain or SaveX as they're now known, that was one of the first markets that they had been targeting because of the inflation going on in Argentina, and saying, listen, we can
Makes
enable
sense.
you to transact in US dollars through stablecoins. You let blockchain and crypto slink away to the background, and all you're actually doing is enabling people to engage in a unit of a digital asset that is pegged to the US dollar, and provide the off ramps so that you can monetize that back into true USD fiat,
Yeah,
and that to engage in the financial lives in the real economy in the way that you need to. So there's credence to
yes,
to the song that's coming out here with Javier Milei, but I think the execution of the cure to what's going on in Argentina financially may not involve a massive step towards Bitcoin. It
no,
could be just, listen, there may be more of a opportunistic campaign that is pursued by entrepreneurs and fintech players in Argentina, or perhaps in other parts of the world, that are looking at Argentina, just like Igor Kamel was from SaveX, and say, listen, we're going to set up shop there. We're going to get ourselves onto the ground, into the local market, understand the local market culture and the way that people spend money and the way that they run their financial lives, and say, we're going to put
yeah,
this into people's hands.
yeah,
I think there's an opportunity to do so there, but it's still, I think there's a bit of not insecurity, but a bit of imbalance perhaps in
yeah.
some of the political ideals that are being pursued here in Argentina from something that would be, more globally accepted. But anyway.
Yeah, study needs help. I just don't see. I mean, obviously, and just discussing Argentina's case, right? I mean, from what I've known, as I said, I am not an expert in Argentina's politics or their financial system, but clearly he wanted to. Mr. Millet wanted to reduce the size of the government that he felt was clearly not fit for purpose and overblown, and just wasting, literally just borrowing to spend money, and none of it on important stuff. Now he starts. And you've probably seen a YouTube video of him where he does have a whiteboard piece. I know you don't like them, but he does have one, and he's got all these stickers of all these ministries, and just takes one at a time and keeps throw them into the bin. Like, in this ministry, education the ministry, to the bin, and this ministry to the bin,
Wow.
climate change the ministry to the bin. So not even seen that video, which is scary. But I think what he's trying to make a point is, I'm just going back to basics, and that's what I focus on. So I'm not sure how can you on one side stop inflation and go through this massive financial, fiscal, and societal change of dollarization with pared down, back down administration. So I'm not sure how you marry those two.
Yeah.
But then again, like when you have friends like Elon Musk supporting you and your ideals, maybe Elon has a back pocket PayPal type of solution that he could lend him. I don't know. He's been very open with his support. So Who knows? Maybe
I missed that point. Are they pals, Elon and Mr. Milei?
Apparently, yes. He's been very supportive on X about his appointment. So watch this space.
Okay. All right. And I mean, I'm going to keep looking at it from a stablecoin perspective. But
yes,
it'll be nice to see, interesting to see what happens here. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Speaking of notable names, there was one of the biggest ones in crypto, Vitalik Buterin.
Yes.
Yesterday published his manifesto, and CoinDesk did a nice summary of that with an opinion piece on everyone needs a manifesto. And within that CoinDesk piece, they quoted the Defiance, which is another media site, Cami Russo, who wonderfully summarized it. And that Buterin's DAC philosophy, which is decentralization acceleration, okay, D/ACC, advocates for a deliberate and balanced path in technological development, focusing on technologies that ensure defense, centralization, and human flourishing. The concept emerges as a counterbalance to the unbridled techno-optimism espoused by figures like Mark Andreessen and challenges the EAC, which is effective accelerationist movement.
Yes.
Okay. So just to put this in a nutshell, I had a quick look at the first couple of paragraphs of Vitalik's very, very long manifesto. It's
very long.
Yeah. Like, would be 20, 25 pages if you were to print the whole thing out. But what the picture he paints, and I'll see if I can do this through spoken word, is that there's an anti-technology view, and it is a small child on a path looking at dystopia ahead of him or her on that path. And that it's the anti-technology view, safety behind us, dystopia ahead, right? That is the anti-technology view. The accelerationist view is that dangers are behind, and it is, again, the small child on the path with a big, angry-looking bear behind that child, and then utopia ahead, a lovely, huge castle with big, bright lights over it. That's the accelerationist view. My view, or Vitalik's view, dangers behind, but multiple paths forward ahead, some good, some bad. So the child is on the path. The scary bear is behind the child, but to the left, you see the big glowing castle with the big bright lights behind it. And on the right, you see the dystopian view of a dark sky with lightning striking that dark, just ramshackle looking castle. So he's saying, listen, we have an opportunity here. Technology acceleration and the decentralization of technology is something that could lead us down a path of, hey, this is where the world needs to go. This is leading us towards a good place, or it could lead us towards a bad place. I haven't yet dug into the whole thing. I probably will at some point over the next week or so. But what were some of your initial thoughts in hearing about this manifesto, Mai?
Yeah, listen, I signed up to CoinDesk, back in 2017, back to the point of newsletter. The article came in as it's 28th, so it was super fresh late last night. I read it. I haven't read the manifesto in full, but I was just going through it. It was quite long. Maybe my view of it, my personal view, was heavily, heavily tainted by the fact that I've been reading Scary Smart.
Okay.
Have you read it?
No.
By Mo Gaudat. I recommend it. I highly recommend it, I have to say. I heard him speak at the Diary of a CEO, and he mentioned Scary Smart. I was like, hold on a second, this is about AI, and I need to pick it up, I need to read it. So heavily influenced about what I've been reading about AI and where humanity is, and particularly where we are when it comes to technology development. When I first read the article about manifesto, my first reaction probably was, he's totally missing the point.
Okay.
Because he's missing AI.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah. So, and I know I think he barely touches up on it. And I haven't finished the book. I have to say, I'm just 3/4 through Scary Smart, and has really influenced, and I think not dampened, but I think has given me a realistic view where I am with my thinking with technology and how it evolves.
Okay.
And to the point of the child piece, I think this is quite interesting. And I said, it's like, listen, it's easy going, like Mo writes in a very, very easy way, and he's done great. You might not agree with everything, but knowing spent 10 years, managing Google X, I think he definitely knows what he's talking about. But when you consider that in the next 5 years, call it 10 at a max push, AI will be, say, 1 billion times more intelligent than all of humankind together.
It's
And
mind-blowing.
yeah, and then considering the manifesto when it comes to technology, what technology are we talking about? What technology are we talking about when at the very near, and this is now, as Mo describes it, this is the point of no return. We can't put that genie back in the bottle. We have created AI. AI is evolving. And it is very interesting in the manifesto, reminded me so much of that of Scary Smart, because clearly he equates AI to a child. And that's why it's very easy for me to understand and to be able to also explain it, which is you need to think about AI where we are today as that child, say, 6 to 8 years old, and you're teaching them. And that's how we've actually taught this artificial intelligence at the moment, right? We give them something, they go and figure it out. So, the perfect example of it, the little box with the square triangle and, round pegs, and the child picks it up and kind of, figures out which one of the holes it goes to, which one is going to fix in or fit in. That's how AI has evolved. It takes the data, trial and error, looks for those, patterns, historical, and it learns from that. So currently what we are with the AI models is that child of, say, 6 to 8 years old, it may have been a bit earlier. And what are we doing is we're fitting them information. And the information, the equivalent to this box that we have with around the square and triangle pegs, is all the data that's online. So if that data is what we currently are given from a humankind perspective, negativity, riots in Dublin, blowing up, wars, terrorism, and so forth, that's what that child is going to learn to be the norm.
That's deep.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at those 3 pictures in the manifesto that Vitalik put up of the child on the path. And I was looking at that from the perspective that the child on the path was society and humanity. But is that child on the path AI?
Yeah. But to me, it was just like, that's great. But if we are surpassed by AI, doesn't matter, because it will be technology deciding the future technology. So are we point in time in the future, that singularity event, because we really won't be able to predict, to get to the point that AI is clearly more intelligent than us. How technology evolves, that future path, that castle will not be up to us. Whether that castle is bright or has light or is darker, it will totally not be up to us. It will totally be up to the AI and what AI decides to do.
Oh yeah, I know some wicked smart people who are incredibly excited about the intersection point between AI and blockchain. And I'm aware of a company working on a consensus mechanism for AI, and say that you've got 5 LLMs that are all producing some output. Which one can we have a consensus amongst these 5 and call out which one may not be right, and have this all be completely code driven? And when you start thinking about the composability of smart contracts and blockchains with how advanced AI has become almost in the last, what has been unleashed into our hands in the last year or two.
Yeah.
This has been a big wave that's been building for, 50 years.
Yeah.
That it's just mind blowing to think about what, it was Lex Sokolin who was at an investor dinner with me that I had in London last week. And I went around the table because it was Thanksgiving week, and I asked everybody what they were thankful for in Web3. Yeah. And Lex Sokolin's view was, I'm just thankful the robots are here.
Wow.
So
there you go. but look, and yeah, absolutely. That's where my kind of thinking is coming to. I did not know what I know now from an AI perspective, before I read the 3/4 of the book. but now it's really influencing how looking at Web3, for example, right? So what if we could actually marry the two to say, well, we can influence, we could actually have AI that could provide a Web3 world to a product, to a child that informs of the positives. So then that reinforcements comes as default. So, that you had access to something that actually creates the opposite effect, that is aggressive, that is negative, that it does not promote ethical principles, that by default that actually would be put aside, but actually present the opposite, right? So how we could actually have that positive reinforcement within AI and Web3 that feeds into that AI child that will grow to realize, no, humankind are not these terrible people or species that are not worth supporting and actually can be spared off. And sure, they're only going to go on and kill themselves, but actually they're actually worth keeping. So there's a line in the books that Mo says is, what we're missing at the moment is that you think about it, like in 5 years' time, 5 to 10 years' time, the intelligence of AI would be like Einstein to humanity being the fly. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you inform all that we do today in technology to the point that the Einstein of the near future looks at the fly and says, it's okay, it's just a fly, I don't need to kill it.
Yeah.
That was mind-boggling to me.
It's deep. What you're saying here, Mai, is getting me thinking about the digitally unique entity, intelligent entity that could be proven to be its own entity through the provenance of a blockchain.
Yeah.
And this is the story that William Gibson wrote in the early 1980s called Neuromancer. And the digitally unique entities that were their own entities and intelligent entities.
Mm-hmm.
And Wintermute was the name of one of them. And there was, you got me thinking about this book now. And Neuromancer was written, I think, in 1980, like I said, 1982. And he was interviewed afterwards, after he wrote it. And this is where his famous quote came from, out of an interview, I think in the New York Times, when he was talking about the book Neuromancer, where he said, the future is already here. It's just not that evenly distributed.
Very good. That's a great line.
But I will leave you with that, Mai. And I think that this conversation and my idea of speaking to you about these 3 or 4 things that are happening right now in the world, I think that all of my best dreams came true. So thank you for riffing on these things with me. And I am very much looking forward to our next chat. And perhaps in Nappy Valley again.
Absolutely. On a sunny day, hopefully too, with some good coffee and tea.
You got it. Thank you so much, Mai.
Not at all. Thanks, Pete.
That does it for this week, folks. You can learn more about the stories we covered in the show notes on our website, moneyneversleeps.ie. Thanks to Mai Santamaria for all the insights she shared and co-hosting this episode with me. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, as it helps others to find the show. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm an early-stage startup investor focused on where fintech meets crypto and crypto meets Web3, and I lead the Techstars Web3 Accelerator. There are plenty of links in the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie on how to get in touch, so don't hesitate to reach out. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!